is this? I don't know. It's me. It's Amid the Ruins. It's a guy who makes dire wave music. It's Amid the Ruins. Dire wave music. What I've talked about in, probably 100 articles at Jay's Analysis is the implementation of the AI smart grid and the giant smart cities, which is what IBM talks about publicly building. And that's where we're going, and that's what I think we have to be really concerned about. So all of these tensions, they are part of a long-term strategy to basically get everybody moved into mega cities. They'll be forced off of land and so forth for environmental reasons, and basically concocted and invented environmental nonsense. Then you'll be stuck in some hellhole mega city in a, basically a carton-size apartment living over a Target or something, or inside of a Target or a Walmart, as I said several years ago. It's actually coming true now. There's actually Target cities. This is all part of the long-term globalist strategy. So, but to get there, you've got to have the constant clash, the constant alchemical blending and mixing and smashing together right out of Manichaeanism to produce the convergence, to produce the synthesis. And that's what's crucial in all this, and what is absolutely true from an alchemical, esoteric, philosophical, and geopolitical perspective, the fact that the ruling elite seek to be post-human. jaysanalysis.com. fix today's problems politically. And this is what so many people in alt circles and alt-right and alt-whatever and alt-media, they all seem... All right, welcome. Here we are, we're back. And I like it when people, if you keep coming and keep coming at me, I just double down and I do more streams and I do more responses, and it has more effect, Lord willing, God's grace. So I'm not deterred by all of this constant drama and nonsense. And if we want to go into, that kind of stuff, we can. I'm happy to do that. Let's talk about who some of these people are, what they're into, what they're doing, the geopolitical forces behind what all's going on. We can go into Denzinger. Got Denzinger pulled up for you here right now. And we can get into the present implosion that's going on apparently within the world of trad Catholicism. Things are heating up. And not just trad Catholicism, but even the world of normies in the Catholic realm as well. Now, as you know, I've had a lot of interactions over the years here and there, mainly blogging 10 years ago with Taylor Marshall when I was new to the issues of divine simplicity and the energies and all that. And actually, initially, I kind of liked Taylor back in the day. He used to comment on different blogs that I would go on, and he used to comment on mine at times. And then things obviously went in a different direction. So once I left the world of Rome, I didn't immediately go into Orthodoxy, but just found it less and less convincing. But the irony is that where I was at 10 years ago is the position that Taylor has presently adopted. That's the big irony here, is that he would have called me a loon, a trad maniac at the time, and then here we are 10 years later, and he's adopted this SSPX type of position. Now, we're not going to focus on Taylor Marshall and all these antics of the Roman Catholic apologists, but I do want to hit on some of this just because the world of Roman Catholicism from the inside is different than the world of Roman Catholicism from the outside. Now, that can be said for any position or organization or church or entity, sure. I'm not saying that in itself is what proves or disproves any given position. So, I'm not saying that because I can find a bunch of problems in these different positions or in these so-called theologians that disproves the whole thing, or in their lives or whatever. I don't do the drama with people's lives. That's typically what other people do. The only reason I'm pointing this one out is because it's illustrative. It's illustrative of what happens when you don't have the normative experience that we would say is consistent with the patristic experience in terms of how we come to know God and what the experience of the church and the saints is supposed to be. So, for example, if you listen to the stream that I did with Sneck yesterday or the day before, whenever it was, we talked about the admission on the part of Bishop Barron that there was this loss. Something was now missing. And yet, at the same time, the Roman Catholic Church is supposed to possess the fullness, right? And the Orthodox Church is lacking. But yet, we're told that Vatican II was partly an attempt to try to find the missing links to the church fathers, the missing links to the Eastern liturgy, all of these different things, right? So we're going to go into a lot of that today. We're going to go into this. And another thing I want to do too, I may set it up as a separate stream. I may just do the kind of critique of Vatican II and was it infallible and all that in this stream. And then right after this, I might do a second stream, or I might do it all in one. I'm not sure what the best way to approach it is. I'll just have to see how it goes. But we're also going to cover some of Pelican, because there's a separate book. I know that we haven't worked our way through the totality of the Pelican series, but I might skip over to this one instead, because this one is a really good introduction to the philosophy of the Cappadocians. Probably the best that I could think of if you're new to the topic. And I mean, I'm trying to work through a book right now, writing a book, so I'm utilizing some of these kind of really good key sources. Obviously, the Bradshaw book, I'm reading this through for the second time. Really, really good stuff. But we don't want to just critique the just quote contradictions between Vatican II and previous dogma. We also want to understand the different paradigm. And this is something, if you go and listen to the many talks that I've done with Father Deacon Ananias, then you know that that we've covered this, right? We've covered it many, many times. He and I have done multiple streams going through Aristotelian philosophy, Aristotelian categories, how that is transformed in the Orthodox understanding. There's not a one-to-one necessarily correspondence between the meaning that those words had in pagan philosophy and the meaning that they come to have in the patristic mindset as the theology is explicated over the centuries, right? Classic example, logos. Right? Logos is not synonymous between the usage in I don't know why that didn't show up. The alert box is on. It's supposed to show up. Let's see, where's the alert box? Oh, it's behind Taylor Marshall. So let me move the alert box, and then I'll replay your little ding dong there. Thank you for your little ding dong. We love your little ding dongs here. All right, let me fix that. Yes, there we go. Easter worshiper in the house. What's up, Easter worshiper? All right, let me make me smaller. It's kind of hard to make me smaller next to Taylor Marshall, because Taylor Marshall is literally like that tall. But we will try. Okay, so I got the ding dong zombie box in its right place, and let me lock it there, and I'll replay this for you. There you go. Look at that, Easter worshiper with his little ding dong, ding donging in, and then we got little bitty tiny baby Taylor Marshall. Anyway, so the whole point of all this is to get at the real points of departure between our theology, our paradigm, our system, and theirs. And the fact that we have some overlap does not mean that we have synonymous systems. And that's the key here. Are there overlap between Orthodox and Thomistic ideas? Sure. But there's overlap between any position potentially and any other position, right? I mean, I could say, let's say for instance, Luciferians, as I believe in one God. And I could say, well, I believe in one God. Well, there we go. We've got the same system at work. No, because we both agree there's, quote, one God. Yeah, but what that we mean by that is obviously radically different. So the fact that we're using the same words really has nothing to do with necessarily having the same meanings or conceptions. This is the word concept fallacy. And it also doesn't mean that there's no similarity or no overlap. For example, when St. Maximus utilizes Neoplatonic ideas, there's some overlap, but there's also dissimilarity. Okay, so that it really doesn't matter whether there's similarity or dissimilarity, because it's a case-by-case basis as well. Right? There might be a situation where there's no similarity. There might be a situation where there's a lot of similarity. So there's no one-size-fits-all way to look at, compare, and analyze without considering context as a whole, paradigms as a whole. So that's what we want to do here. But in regard to Taylor, the reason I'm bringing him up is because so this last couple weeks, well, within the last week, I've had two traditional Catholic friends, a couple of the few remaining ones that still will interact with me. I have about 4 or 5 maybe that still will interact with me, that I've been friends with for a long time, many years. One of them reached out. I won't say anybody's name, but one reached out and has been having a kind of crisis. I'm not going to go into anybody's personal details or anything like that. Another one reached out, similar situation, well, for different reasons, by the way. One doctrinal, other not so much doctrinal, but both of which I think stem from the Roman Catholic struggle. And in the case of Taylor Marshall, I'm going to say it's the same thing. It's stemming from the Roman Catholic struggle. I know what it's like to be a Roman Catholic. I know what it's like to deal with the issues. I know what it's like to struggle with reconciling Vatican II to the prior dogmas. I know what it's like to, be in the world of the SSPX and attending the Latin Mass. I understand all this. I know it very well from being there. And again, I don't hate Roman Catholics. I don't hate Tim Gordon or any of these people that are kind of freaking out and having these fits and episodes. I don't hate Taylor Marshall. I think that they are doing the very things that I've experienced. But of course, it's a lot different to reflect on, a mindset or an attitude that you had, maybe 10 years ago. And I'm not saying this like, oh, I'm better than Taylor Marshall because I had that attitude 10 years ago. But I did, and I can have some insight into like what is going on here. And the problem is that the Roman Catholic system is a bunch of systems. So on one level, yeah, you could say it's the papacy and it's these councils and it's these books and it's Denzinger and it's this church over in Rome and it's the Gregorian Academy and it's all this different stuff. Yeah, I know. But on another level, the actual praxis of the Roman Catholic world is a lot of different things that you rely on. So sometimes it's extremely scholastic and philosophical. Sometimes it's very obsessively the opposite, where you're relying on mystical experiences and visions. Now, what's different with Orthodoxy is that we don't stress or look to visions and mystical experiences to confirm what just happens to be our chosen presuppositions, right? So, in other words, if I had a mystical vision that said, Jay, all of your theology in terms of orthodoxy is absolutely correct, and I, angel so-and-so, angel soprano, angel T soprano, confirm that your theology is perfectly orthodox. Go forth with this angelic blessing. In the world of orthodoxy, the first thing that we would do is say that's probably pre-list. That's probably a delusion that was sent, you see. And if you read the Philokalia, this comes up, right, where the inclination is to not leap into and jump upon these visions. And a couple of the key signs that the saints and elders and fathers all kind of talk about that indicate when a vision is legitimate or illegitimate has to do with how we view ourselves, pride, humility, the experience itself being one of kind of overwhelming peace, love, assurance, or does it lead us to this pre-list of now being super prideful? If you listen to the debate that Father Deacon Dr. Ananias just had with Matt Slick, you can see a perfect example of the ultimate reliance upon the individual's experience, subjective experience, that will then be the determining factor for what he accepts from that point on, because it was this supposed Calvinist experience that he had. That's going to tell him the Protestant canon of Scripture and Calvinism and his do-it-yourself sect of Matt Slickianism is the true church and the true way to go. You see, that formative mystical quote-unquote experience has determined the rest of his system. And what's funny is that Roman Catholicism has this just incessant emphasis on a kind of external, juridical, authoritarian response to this question of how do you know and what's the right way to go. It's almost a worship of authority. And in fact, I would critique that very simply, that Roman Catholicism is a worship of authority. Right? It's one of the key problems here is this idolatrous worship of authority. And yes, it's possible to have an idolatrous worship of authority. Right? I mean, what is it? Is it Catherine of Siena that says even if the Pope were to tell you directly the words of Satan, you should still follow it because it's the Pope. That's worship of authority. It's ludicrous, right? Forget the exact quote, but it's it's something like that. And so between Matt Slick and Taylor Marshall, you would think there would be a world of difference, right? You would think there would be just an infinite chasm of dissimilarity between the experience of the Calvinist and the experience of the mystical Thomist, right? Which apparently now it's a mystical Thomism, right? It's not a rationalism, right? But I'm going to play this experience because a lot of people didn't believe me when I said, they thought I was making it up. Oh, Taylor Marshall didn't actually claim to have a vision of milkers. No, he does. And what I'm getting at is that you will notice the similarity between the Protestant and the Roman Catholic excess is exactly the same. Like the relying on the subjective experience, which is ironically the very thing that both of those groups, right? Matt Slick as a presuppositionalist, typically, you can't just rely on your experience. You got to prove your arguments, right? Matt claims to be a presuppositionalist. And likewise with Taylor, you can't just rely on your subjective experience. You got to submit to the Pope. He's made a career, 10 years, of making this basic argument that you can't have Christianity without the office of the papacy. But now, because of his mystical vision and all this other nonsense, he's better. He knows better than Rome. And that's just the standard process that happens. So I'm going to play you, and you'll notice the similarity between the claims. I'm not saying they had the same experience. I'm just saying that this is all indicative of humanist religious creation. Whether it's Protestantism or whether it's Roman Catholicism, they both are basically the same in terms of worshiping creatures, obsessing over incessant creaturely things. And what's missing here is the authentic experience of uncreated grace and the cleansing of the nous. Neither of those positions has any conception of that. Yet this is fundamental to orthodoxy, that without the undergoing the process of repentance and the cleansing of the nous, which is not just the mechanical experience of going to auricular confession in the Roman Catholic Church, it's the actual transformation of the individual. And that's not even possible in the Roman Catholic system because of their doctrine of the beatific vision. You don't have, there's no possibility of the experience of uncreated grace in this life or seeing God, knowing God directly in this life, because their whole theology is predicated on that not being possible in this life. Likewise, the Calvinist, even though he doesn't really have the categories, he just as much confesses created grace. He just as much confesses and denies the possibility of actually participating in the uncreated grace of God and having a direct experience in life from God and with God. Both of the positions, even though they're radically different in all these frills and fancy talk and whatever, at a fundamental level, both deny the reality of experiencing uncreated grace, experiencing and possessing that in this life, experiencing and possessing that on an individual level, right? And they preclude that as even a possibility with the rest of the theology that they confess, both the Protestant and the Roman Catholic. Now, what do the Protestant and the Roman Catholic share in common? Well, it just happens to be absolute divine simplicity, the Augustinian presuppositions, because Aquinas, of course, adopts the basic Augustinian presuppositions about who God is in terms of his essence, the filioque, created grace, etc., etc. And when the Reformation happened, they defaulted to accept all of those same positions without question. So the real root of this dialectic between the Protestant and the Roman Catholic is not in do you like Calvin or do you like Thomas Aquinas. In fact, I've got a great little book here from a philosopher who helped me in my transition from Calvin to Aquinas. His name is Arvin Voss. He's a pretty well-known academic. Aquinas and Calvin, contemporary Protestant thought. And he just shows all the similarities and the kind of easy, smooth transition. Now, what was Taylor Marshall's background? Well, wasn't he an Anglican? I'm not faulting converts, by the way. That's not the point here, right? There's nothing. It's not being a convert in itself that is or isn't problematic. I'm just pointing out that the doctrine of God is the real issue here. Who is God? What are we talking about? What do we mean by these words and terms and phrases? Do Roman Catholics have the same triadology and Christology as the first millennium? Do they have the Cappadocian doctrine of the Trinity? I don't think that they do. It's very easy, I think, to demonstrate that. We'll look at some of that in this book. Okay, my allergies are going bad, so I've got like a super sinus headache today. And we will get to the super chats here in a minute, but first I'm going to play this Taylor Marshall clip. Now, hopefully this works. I'm on a different computer than I'm usually on, so I'm not positive if the sound will come through to you guys, but let me... It's not that long. It's just a little clip, but it's going to illustrate the point I'm making. Welcome. We got 317 nerds, if you would. We only got 88 likes. Please smash like if you're enjoying this talk. Even if you can't directly hear it through the right way, at least it will echo in the microphone to a degree, so you'll be able to hear some of it. But you'll get the point here.
A visionary. I'm certainly not a prophet, but I have seen supernatural things in my life as a Christian, as a Catholic, and one of those things happened last night, and I'm reluctant to share it, but I think it'll be of comfort to other people. So yesterday I went to confession, and one of the things I confessed was being prideful and judgmental and worried and concerned about the state of the church and corruption in the church.
I'm going to pause this just for 1 minute to make a brief comment here. First of all, another thing that will be very common, and by the way, it's the Eastern European and Russian Orthodox who typically will actually make this valid criticism, which is that who comes on streams and talks about their repentance and their humility? I mean, this itself is pre-list, okay? So you'll notice Orthodox, they don't typically come on the live streams to talk about their humility and, oh, my friends, you see, before, when I was a Roman Catholic, when I was an Orthodox person, I was taken by my pride. I was lifted up. I was vain. I was full of my own fancy. I was fancy free, friend. I was full of myself. And then I read about the papacy, and I realized that all of those years I had been deluding myself, friend. I had been caught up in my own BS. And then I prostrated myself before Rome. I prostrated myself in a profound act of humility. I perhaps lain there for 18 hours. In fact, I lost all sense of space and time in my experience of profound humility and repentance. And then I knew deep down that my whole life had been but a lie. You see, I mean, this is just, it just oozes, right? I mean, who was this guy? There was a guy a couple days ago, right? Orthodox, so-called guy, Romanidian, IC clown people guy. And what does he do? He's got all these tweets about how humble he is. How much he wants to be beaten down because of his pride and because of his vanity. And please, I invite other Orthodox, as I pray, to comment and beat me down with your words, dear brethren. This is all bull. It's all pre-list. It's all fake. And everybody who's honest can see through this nonsense. You're not fooling anybody here. You built a brand. Now you have a problem with the system that you built. So you got to cover up for this garbage by, I had a mystical experience. And by the way, let me explain to you my profound humility, brother. I'm just taken aback by my, and this is what Flanders did. Remember when Flanders did his stream and it was like, I was so prideful. I was full of pride. And now let me explain to you and let me tell you how prideful I've been. As if that's not itself just oozing with this, just come on, man. Everybody can see through that stuff. It's It's just gross, dude. It's just cringe.
And scandals. And it's been a kind of a struggle for me lately. So, I confessed that, and the priest had some very good things to counsel me on that. And later that night, which was last night, I was doing an examination of conscience before bed, and I was thinking on that point of being worried and concerned and judgmental and all these negative thoughts and emotions about the Holy Catholic Church, Mother Church. And as I was, suddenly, I saw this beautiful woman. She had blonde hair. She was perfect, no wrinkles, no spots. And I immediately discerned that this was Holy Mother of the Church. And she was writhing in pain. She was in a bed, and there was sheets on her, and she was very sick. And I noticed that her breasts were engorged with milk.
Now, you trads, I mean, this is gold. I couldn't have asked for something better. You trads, you guys have attacked me incessantly. You've gone ape over me. You have said everything, and I'm not mad. I forgive you guys, okay? I'm not worried about it because I know what it's like to be a trad, okay? And I'm going to be honest, I didn't want to forgive you guys, but I have to. I have to make myself because Christ tells us we have to, right? But look, you guys have attacked me. I told you that this guy was wrong, and he won't debate because he knows that we would floor him when it comes to Thomism, when it comes to divine simplicity, when it comes to these issues, right? And when I would bring this up for months and months on Twitter, I would constantly try to talk. I would say, let's do this, let's do it. No, what does he do? He blocks me, right? And now what's happened, within a few months after this blocking, what does he do? He comes and does this car video of this ridiculous claim to this mystical vision of engorged milkers. Let's play this again.
Beautiful woman. She had blonde hair. She was perfect, no wrinkles, no spots. And I immediately discerned that this was Holy Mother of the Church. And she was writhing in pain. She was in a bed, and there was sheets on her, and she was very sick. And I noticed that her breasts were engorged with milk. Tons of milk. And
I mean, you know what? If you guys think that is a valid approach, if you want to follow that, then you get what you deserve, you see. I mean, to follow this over what we have in Orthodoxy is just sad. I feel sorry for you guys. And all you have to do, look, it's okay to be wrong. Okay, I've been wrong many, many times. It's not the end of the world to be wrong about something, right? I was raised Protestant. I came to eventually see that it's just not right. I tried to defend it, right? It's okay to be wrong. I got into Roman Catholicism. I lived it, breathed it, took it so serious. I mean, I was super committed to this stuff, right? It wasn't like, oh, it's just a, cultural thing. I'll pretend. Dude, I mean, I've read Denzinger twice. Nobody does that, okay? Unless they're serious about their Catholicism. People don't just sit down and read through 800-page books about Catholic dogma. You don't get so serious that you're going to the Latin Mass for years and years and years if you're not taking this serious. So I get it, dude. I understand the modus operandi, the mindset. But this is embarrassing. And it's not just embarrassing because, it's some kind of rivalry with Taylor. I don't follow Taylor Marshall. I don't keep up with the trad drama. I haven't kept up with that in at least a decade. I left all of that stuff. Don't miss it at all. I have no interest in any of that stuff, although I will debate Roman Catholics. But it's illustrative. That's the point here. It's illustrative that it's the exact same issue that you saw with Taylor Marshall. With Matt Slick and the debate with Dr. Ananias, right? What is the foundation really of these positions? Is it really all of this highfalutin philosophy and dogmatics and magisterium and councils and all? Or is it really the subjective desire and experience and the impetus to want to ratify what is your own position? As Father Deacon Dr. Ananias said it really well, I think it describes adequately the Roman Catholic perception, which is, and you could say the same thing for Calvinism. Are we not, I'm speaking as a Roman Catholic or a Calvinist, formerly being one, are we not really just defending an idea? I mean, are you not really just worshiping your idea of God? I never really thought about that when I was a Roman Catholic. It wasn't until I heard, Orthodox critiques where I started thinking that, my idea is not a correspondence to who God is or what God is. Right? They don't match up. And I know that in theory, Roman Catholics confess via negativa. And I know they confess that. And I know in some sense Calvinists would confess that, unless they were like a Clarkian or something. I mean, they actually think that our ideas are literally synonymous with propositions in God's mind. So, but there is a process, and if you go watch Father Peter Hears' talk that he did, that's really good on heterodoxy. It's the talk that he did about a month ago on the Holy Fathers. I highly recommend this talk because all of the issues that we're talking about here today with Calvinists or with the Roman Catholics, the Thomists, none of it can be settled through factual propositions, debate, and analysis. Now, you may think that sounds weird. What? Why would you do apologetics and discuss and debate if it can't be settled? Because ultimately, it's not an issue that's intellectual. The reason that it's not is because it can be, right? But what I'm saying is that it can't be reduced to that. So yes, God can use argumentation. He can use good arguments to persuade people. But the issues at hand here are not propositional, rational problems. They're problems that man in his heart has. And the whole basis of both the Calvinist, Protestant, Augustinian / Thomistic Roman Catholic approach, by the way, it's not actually Augustine's view of illumination is closer to our view. But setting aside that, the Roman Catholic perception of how we know God and the Calvinist conception or Protestant conception of how we know God are themselves both propositional and based on created grace. So you see, the system has already determined from the outset the limitations and possibilities of knowing God. This is why St. Gregory Palamas says that if you go with Barlaam's presuppositions, it leads to atheism. You will end up atheist. I'm not saying that necessarily every person ends up atheist. He's saying that if you followed it out to its consistent logical conclusion, you would end up atheist. And that's because, again, the system has determined from the outset that you don't actually directly know the God that you're proclaiming to believe in, teach about, dogmatize about. You know created effects. You never have the direct experience of his uncreated energies. At least not in this life. But doesn't that really beg the question? Then how do you know God? I mean, this is really the whole entirety of the argument throughout the debate, the dialogue with the Barlaamite, right, between Palamas and Akindinos. That's where it leads. I mean, this is really just rehashed what Dr. Bradshaw says in Aristotle East and West, right? If we take all of these assumptions, actus purus, all of the Aristotelian movement of eternal matter, unactualized actualizer type of stuff that you see in Phaser and that you see in every Thomist that I've ever heard of, or the Roman Catholic doctrine of divine simplicity, then we're left with an unknowable, unsaving knowledge of God. And it's not the doctrine of the Cappadocians, you see. But let's hear this again, because I want you to understand that, I mean, I told you guys that Taylor Marshall he's not even that great of an exponent of Catholicism. And I said it 10 years ago. And here he is relying on something utterly ridiculous.
Immediately discerned that this was Holy Mother of the Church. And she was writhing in pain. She was in a bed and there was sheets on her, and she was very sick. And I noticed that her breasts were engorged with milk, tons of milk.
Tons, by the way, tons.
There were babies and children crying out to her that were hungry, and she wanted to feed them, and she was upset, but she was so sick she could hardly sit up from her bed. And then I thought to myself, she's poisoned. She doesn't want to nurse the children
So wait a minute. So Holy Mother Church is poisoned. Really? You sure you want to go that route? I mean, just on its face, this is preposterous. Okay, Taylor Marshall, I don't believe you. I think it's bullshit. It's absurd. And I mean, really, what else do you need? Why would you even continue listening to this guy? I don't get it. I mean, I get the impetus to hold on to what you feel like is so, necessary, so important, so save Western civilization. But it's not going to happen. It's done. Right? You're not going to get it from the SSPX. And just on this point alone, I mean, let me show you the absurdity of this from the Roman Catholic dogmatic perspective. The idea that Mother Church could be poisoned and giving this out is ludicrous. Right? The Church, in terms of her sacraments in the Roman Catholic position, cannot be poisoned, cannot be... I'm trying to find this. It's a comment in Auctorum Fide, so I'm just trying to find it. Here it is. So I'm going to show you the Denzinger text for yourselves. So let's come down here to 1578. So I don't know. Hopefully you guys can read that. It might be a little too small. I can make this bigger if we need to here. Trying to change the size of this. Anyway, we'll just leave it as it is. It's Denzinger 1578. So now this is the condemnation of the Synod of Pistoia. So if you remember, there was a group called Jansenists, and Jansenists were radical in the sense of being strict Augustinians. And the Jansenists wanted to do a lot of things that were kind of similar to what Protestants wanted, and even similar in ways to Orthodox. But eventually this became condemned. And it was not seen to be consistent with Catholic teaching because, maybe I can make this bigger like this. There we go. Because the problem with the Jansenist presupposition, in light of the office of the papacy and the claims of the Roman See, it would be to presume that the church has already and for a long time erred in something fundamental. Right? It would suggest that the failure to perform the rites and the sacraments in the vernacular, which is one of the key points that they were having an issue with, right? It would suggest that the church had committed a serious mistake, and it's, as you can see, very problematic to say that the church can commit some serious mistake in her rites and in her liturgy and in her sacraments, because it would mean that it is a compromising of the fundamental constitution of the church in Roman Catholic theology. In other words, it would mean that something that she could never fail to have, namely holy sacraments, valid sacraments, sacraments to save the world, are now lacking. And so, in other words, it would compromise the indefectibility of the church, right? So that's the problem with this idea and why it's considered injurious, heretical, etc. But if you look there at 1578, it says the prescription of the synod, this is the Synod of Pistoia, the Jansenists, about the order of transacting business in the conferences in which, after it prefaced in every article that which pertains to faith, to the essence of religion, must be distinguished from that which is proper to discipline. Now, what they're doing here, the Jansenists are making an argument about distinguishing dogma from discipline, right? And so conceivably, you could see, okay, there might be a distinction here, but the problem is that this argument was being used to justify that the Roman See had erred in terms of its discipline. In itself, discipline there is to be distinguished from distinguish what is necessary and useful to retain the faithful in spirit from that which is useless or burdensome for the liberty of the sons of the new covenant to endure, but more so from that which is dangerous or harmful, namely leading to superstition and materialism. Insofar as by the generality of the words it includes and submits to prescribed examination, even the discipline established and approved by the church, as if the church, which is ruled by the Spirit of God, could have established discipline, which is not only useless and burdensome for Christian liberty to endure, but which is even dangerous and harmful and leads to superstition and materialism. This position is false, rash, scandalous, dangerous, offensive to pious ears, injurious to the church and to the Spirit of God by whom it is guided, and at least erroneous. Therefore, it is a Jansenist proposition to say that the Roman See can establish bad rites or disciplines. So as you can see, it doesn't really matter what one thinks of Vatican II as an individual Catholic or its rights in terms of its Novus Ordo promulgation, right? Novus Ordo Missae, etc. Because you can have all the opinions you want, you cannot say that the Roman See can establish bad disciplines for the entire church. And yes, the new sacraments are for the entire church, obviously. So really this is a no-brainer, and I bring it up because it will go towards refuting not just Taylor, but the entire SSPX type of position. This idea that Vatican II is not infallible and it's really up to the whims of whatever judgment any individual Roman Catholic makes, that he doesn't really have to accept it. Right? Unless he, I guess, chooses to. Right? I mean, what does it mean to have an optional pastoral ecumenical council? So it's optional? That's funny because every FSSP person who's ever been reconciled from the SSPX to Rome, FSSP, has been made to accept Vatican II. Why would that occur? Why would that happen if it was an optional council? This is a trad myth. It's a trad lie, as we'll see here in a moment, that Vatican II is optional. And it doesn't matter how many times the Vatican restates that it's not optional. They will continue on saying that, well, I don't have to accept when the Pope says it's not optional because he didn't say it dogmatically. This is ludicrous. All right? This is just absurd levels of coping mechanisms, right? Welcome, everybody. We have almost 400. So there's the super chat. If you want to leave a super chat, feel free to support the stream by the super chats. But that's just one example. Now, we're not going to just stop there. We're going to look at a couple more places in Denzinger because one of the key points that is crucial to grasping the mistake of the trads is the question of the magisterium and the ordinary and universal magisterium. So, being that I do know Denzinger like the back of my hand, I would like to direct you to another section in Denzinger. And, of course, this is related to Vatican I. So let's scroll down here to 1683. All right. Now, so at the time of Vatican I, there were some interesting questions raised along the same lines relating to not just bad disciplines, but other aspects of Roman Catholic dogma, like the Roman congregations, or the idea of jurisdiction, or the idea of the Holy Office condemning people, right? So, in other words, there were arguments being made like, well, I don't really have to agree to the condemnation of a heretic from the Holy See or from the Holy Office, because that's just an exercise of discipline. So therefore, conceivably, could discipline be rejected? Well, we look at 1683, and it reads, we persuade ourselves, in the middle there, we persuade ourselves also that they did not wish to declare that perfect adhesion to revealed truths, which they recognize as absolutely necessary to attain true progress in the sciences and to refute errors, could be obtained if faith and obedience were given only to the dogmas expressly defined. This is the argument that I only have to adhere to something expressly defined. For even if it were a matter concerning that subjection which is to be manifested by an act of divine faith, it would not have to be limited to those matters that have been defined by express decrees of the councils. Or the Roman Pontiff and his see, it would have to be extended to the matters handed down as divinely revealed by the ordinary teaching power of the church, spread throughout the world. And he says that this is false, right? You don't have to only adhere to dogmas, you have to adhere to all of the decisions and decrees. And we know this because the next point, 1698, continues this argument, because it explicitly states in 1698, judgment and decrees cannot be doubted, even when they are merely juridical. So the judgments and decrees of the Roman See cannot be doubted, even if it's something just juridical. There's also 1792. The object of faith, by divine and Catholic faith, all those things that must be believed, which are contained in the written word of God and tradition, and those things which are proposed by the church, either by solemn magisterium or by her universal ordinary teaching power, are to be believed as divinely revealed. So you see that you cannot reject the universal ordinary magisterium under the guise of saying that I will only follow the dogmas expressly defined by extraordinary magisterium. It's explicitly rejected there. Both attempts, and by the way, there are more if these are not good enough for you, but hopefully these should be good enough to really kind of make the point, right? Now, next up, I would direct you to another issue that I'm not really trying to get bogged down in drama, because I don't really care about this kind of stuff. However, it is worth noting that the trad world is just as problematic as the world of the Novus Ordo that it claims to be superior to. And if you go to this Church Militant article, there is, and this is, I'm saying this is because this relates to Taylor Marshall, because if you go to this Survivor Speaks, there's an entire documentary presentation here. Okay, this video here. So be sure and go. I'm not going to play it because I don't want them to, I don't trust any of these groups. They'll just try to copyright you, ding you. These guys, these people are something else to deal with. So if you go and play the spotlight clip, it will make this point that I'm making about all of these different problems in the SSPX world. And one of their top, quote, canonists, this, what's his name? I forget the, Arge, or some Spanish name. What's the guy's name? Father something. It's in this article and in this video. This guy is like, you know, in all this trouble over this, and he ends up with a castle. Right? He ends up promoted, I'm not making this up, to living in a castle. It's in this video. I'm not going to play the video. I don't remember the guy's name. Father somebody. Hispanic named guy. And now he lives in a giant castle. You can't make this stuff up. Now this is supposed to be, the center of trad world, SSPX. I was looking for the picture of the castle, but can't find it. Anyway, you can go watch it in that video that I linked there. Now, when I say this, it's not because I'm interested in supporting Michael Voris and Church Militant and the Gordon brothers and their histrionics today. It's just to show you that the trad world appears to be imploding and enveloping itself in its own kind of implosion. So you've got Michael Voris and his crew going after SSPX crew and these people. And this, I guess, I'm told, led to Taylor Marshall blocking Gordon and all these characters, right? His former co-host. Anyway, I don't know if I can share this. But really what my point in all this is just to say that it's not accidental that I've had one trad writer and another Catholic guy reaching out this week saying, look, I don't know how to deal with all this. Right? I can't make sense of all this. And tomorrow, right, you've got Francis is going to drop his new encyclical. And it's called Fratelli Tutti. I'm not joking. I know that sounds kind of like the Fratellis, like Goonies. Well, Francis's goons, his Goonies, are going to drop Fratelli Tutti, Francis's new encyclical on human fraternity and solidarity. And what do you think this encyclical is based on? It's based on that humanist style meeting that he had with the imams in, where was it, Abu Dhabi or somewhere? And they say this encyclical is going to be about the humanist gatherings, the humanist manifesto council that Francis originally had planned for this year until COVID happened, right? So part of the reason why people are kind of having these issues is that they know what's coming. Okay, we will be looking forward to Francis's explication of Fratelli Tutti and how we're all brothers and sisters in a Freemasonic sense, even though we're not all brothers and sisters. Okay, but I'm trying to figure out how to do this. So here, what we're going to look at is a couple documents. So the first one is Francis here. And I want you to be very clear. Here's what Francis says. So hopefully you can see this. Okay, here's Francis. This is the 68th address to the National Liturgical Week in Italy. We can affirm with certainty and with magisterial authority, the liturgical reform is irreversible. Can you hear me? Do you hear that? I'm going to put it in the chat for you so you can read it for yourself. We affirm with certainty and with magisterial authority, the liturgical reform, Vatican II, is irreversible. Do you hear me? Can you be honest? What does it say? Okay, it says that. Now let's look at, oh man, I hate it when it does this. This is John the 23rd. I'm not going to read this whole thing. You're going to have to go to Google Translate And you're going to have to put it in there. I'm going to give you the quote, or the link. Okay, and you go to Google Translate. It's not that long. Here it comes. This is the address at the opening of Vatican II. And when you read this, when you put it in Google Translate, you can make it out fine. It's not disputable what he means. He's very clear that this is an ecumenical council. It is called with the full authority, full power, full apostolic universal sense, right? So there's the opening of the council, John the 23rd, his speech telling you it's dogmatic. There's Francis telling you it's dogmatic. Now, what about Paul VI? Oh, you see, he said that it's pastoral. So what? There's nothing in Paul VI calling it pastoral that somehow means that it's not protected by the charism or not dogmatic. He says it defined no new dogmas. So what? That's not the criteria for what makes something dogma in Roman Catholicism. So there in the link, you'll see the speech of Paul VI, 1976, restating and explaining his comment of it being a pastoral council, and laughing and making fun of the people who act like it means that you don't have to accept it. I mean, come on, guys. So this alone, right? Here's 3 clear testaments from the popes that you have to accept Vatican II. And it's thus a trad myth that you don't have to accept it. I think what I'm going to do is do a separate stream for this book. And actually, I may just cut it short and just do this, was it infallible, right? So I'm going to do a separate stream about Vatican II and the documents. I'm going to do a different stream. It wouldn't make sense to combine all this because I want this to be a clear, like, precise video just on that topic. That way, and plus a lot more people will watch it too if I cut it at this and come back later and do a different one, because the longer this goes, the less people are going to watch it. But so I've given you the 3 documents. They're in the links. If you're watching this a year from now, if we're still here, hopefully, you can pull up those links, and you've got 3 testaments: John the 23rd, Paul VI, Pope Francis, telling you that Vatican II has to be accepted. Vatican II opens with the full papal authority. The documents close with full papal authority. It's a trad myth that you don't have to accept Vatican II. If an SSPX person comes back into communion, like the FSSP, they're made to accept Vatican II. And to deny this would be to deny the universal magisterial teaching authority. It would be to say that Rome has, for 60 plus years, enforced heresy, bad doctrines and rites and bad disciplines, which is condemned, which is the denial of the charism. So there you go. So that there's really not much to debate about this. Now, I was going to read it, but the problem is that it's Google Translate, so I'll have to scroll down, and when you scroll down, it jumbles up the text. So you'll have to go read the actual 3 documents that I placed into the text. I'll put the 3 documents also in the show description as well. But there you go. So there we have the pretty clear presentation that you cannot reject the magisterial teaching, whether ordinary or extraordinary. Primal Edge says for $50, an entire community in Ecuador, 90 people just became Orthodox. Awesome. And a Roman Catholic priest, no bishop, is becoming an Orthodox priest. Wow. Praise God for that. And thank you, Tristan, for that money. Much appreciated. Orthodox, $100. Do all Protestants have visions? No. Are they from Christ or mockery? I would say in theory it's possible for Jesus to appear to a Protestant. Sure, God can do whatever he wants to. He hears the prayers of Cornelius, so sure, he could do whatever he wants to. But that kind of a manifestation is not going to produce, pre-list. It's not going to produce these kinds of self-appointed prophet type things. I think this light is driving it's like driving my mind crazy. So outside the church, we don't speculate on, where those visions come from. So we just try to keep it consistent with what we know Revelation says, right? So we're not going to speculate about like whose visions outside the church are coming from where. What's the best book to give a trad? Probably this one. I would say if you're new to Orthodoxy and you want an introduction to our different theology, I would say read this. If it's a trad who's pretty well versed in philosophy, this one. And by extension too, you could do Pelicon's Metamorphosis. Those are all good. But I'm going to do another stream on the other stuff, but I want to cut this one short because I want this to be more accessible. Jair Bear, $10. I would say go watch Craig's debate and talk on Immaculate Conception. Craig's really good on that. But anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. I'm gonna have to go do some other things. This stream is gonna have to cut short. There was other things that I thought I wasn't gonna have to do tonight, but I'm gonna have to go do that. So I'll talk to you guys later, and God bless. Hopefully this is clear with 3 key examples. They'll also be in the show description.